What's up, my little spirits? I seriously need to stop saying when I think I'll have a video uploaded because I always underestimate how long the editing process is actually going to take, but here we are. I am continuing my Cheryl wannabe era with a stage presence ranking video. So what inspired me to do this? I figured there are dozens of groups out there and only one Cheryl, and there is no way that she could possibly ever get around to ranking all of them. So let's give her a bit of a hand. I want to include groups that I thought she wouldn't discuss, and the original motif was Queens of Darkness. It was between Pink Fantasy, Nature, Purple Kiss, and Pixie. However, she has talked extensively about how much she loves Pixie's stage presence, and she's even discussed Purple Kiss from time to time. So, in order to not step on anyone's toes, I decided to remove them and substitute them in with some other groups. The first group I thought was pretty obvious in that I decided to choose DreamNote because their song Ghost, in my opinion, was one of the best released by girl groups in 2021, with the following up songs being First, Poison, Promise, and Wah by Everglow, Pink Fantasy, and Idol respectively. The fourth generation girl groups really were not letting anyone compete with them in that year, but that still left me with one more opening. And I want to include GWSN, but given that their company is in a bit of financial trouble right now and I don't know what the future holds for the group, I decided to hold off on them, and instead I inserted one of my own favorite 4th gen girl groups, being Majors. And there we had our 4 groups to duke it out. I might make more videos like this depending on things like what the reception to it is, and if there are other groups that y'all want me to do videos like this on. I was thinking of making one on some disbanded groups, and then another one that's just the 23 NCT members, but let me know if there are any other new groups that you want me to put on this channel, because I want to try and promote any lesser known groups that I can, especially after this last year. One of my favorite groups being D-Crunch did disband because they just weren't pulling in the audience and sales and success that they need to continue. Also, side note, I do have a ONEUS specific stage presence video in the works, but I'm taking a bit of a break from talking about the group just because I'm still a bit upset about the Raven situation, and I want to wait until RBW gives us a follow-up statement and just see where things currently are. But with all that out of the way, let's move on to the content of today's video. What exactly is stage presence? According to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, it's defined as a quality that attracts attention on stage, and I think that's a good basic definition. The idea of being attracted to something is to be drawn into it, such as like with two magnets that are drawn to each other, and the stronger the attraction, the harder it becomes to escape from it. Therefore, the stronger one's stage presence, the more you want to see it. Now that we know what stage presence is, how do we categorize it? Well, a quick Google search of stage presence archetypes will bring up Cheryl's videos and other sites using her system to classify what types of stage presence different idols have. She truly paved the way for stage presence content, but let's break it down. Idols are individually divided into masculine and feminine performers. This is separate from their sex and gender. For example, Taemin of SHINee, Jimin of BTS, and Wonwoon of ONEUS are all men, but they have feminine energy when performing. Looking on the opposite side of the spectrum, Yoyeon of Girls' Generation, Lisa of Blackpink, and Roojin of ITZY are all women, but they exude masculine energy when performing. Masculine performers tend to perform more with their upper arms, upper torsos, and lower legs. Meanwhile, feminine performers are better at using their lower arms, lower torso, hip, and lower leg regions. I think that Irene, who's a feminine performer, and Seulgi, who's a masculine performer, demonstrate this well in their performances of Naughty. But it's not so simple that idols are just either one or the other. So far, Cheryl has identified 5 idols that can actually switch between auras, And these idols are Yeji of ITZY, San of ATEEZ, Onda of Everglow, Minjae of MCND, and Yena, former member of IZ*ONE, who's now a soloist. In my analysis, there haven't been any idols that I've come across that also fit this rare category. All I can say is that I find it strangely coincidental that all the idols with this in their archetype are all from the 4th generation. Side note, most masculine performers are better off with shorter hair, such as Junghyun of TWICE, whereas feminine performers are better off with longer hair, such as Weijin of MCND. But that isn't always the case. For example, Giselle of aespa is a masculine performer, but actually does better with longer hair, whereas Gio of TWICE is a feminine performer, but does better with shorter hair. Other aspects, such as facial structure and body type, need to be considered. After idols are split between being either masculine or feminine performers, they're further divided into either being overt or covert performers. Overt performers are very extroverted and their energy is much more apparent. Some good examples would include, but are not limited to, J-Hope of BTS, Jennie of Blackpink, Nayeon of TWICE, Jackson of GOT7, and Wendy of Red Velvet. Covert performers are a lot more subtler. This can be either a strength or a weakness. They're far more controlled in their delivery, and they're less prone to overperforming. But they're at the risk of not doing enough and almost being invisible. Some examples of who I think are some good covert performers include, but are not limited to, Suga of BTS, Jisoo of Blackpink, Xiumin of EXO, Moonbyul of Mamamoo, and BI, former member of iKON. It's a little more difficult to explain idols that fluctuate between being both overt and covert performers, so I'm going to link Cheryl's video in the end card where she ranks BTS, EXO, Monsta X, and ATEEZ, as she does a better job explaining things there because RM of BTS and Kai of EXO actually fall into this rare category of idols that can switch between the two. And while being both overt and covert performers at the same time is a rarity, it's a little more common to see idols shift from one style to the other over time, and a good example of this is actually Kim Woojin. When he was a member of Stray Kids, he was much more inclined to being a covert performer, but once he started his solo career, he actually kind of broke out of his shell, to say, and became more of an overt performer. And finally, we move on to the final part of describing an idol's archetype, and this is where we classify them based on their facial expressions and their body language. The first of these 4 categories is the charismatic archetype, and this is probably the one that most people are familiar with. They have both strong facial expressions and body language. This is where we have idols such as Bangchan of Stray Kids, Leah of ITZY, Mark of NCT, Mia of Everglow, and the soloist Alexa. Looking at the opposite of these performers are the sensual archetype. They have both subtle body language and facial expressions. Examples of some idols with this archetype are Yujin of Stray Kids, Leah of ITZY, Yeonjun of TXT, Ningning of aespa, and the soloist Yua. Adjacent to the sensual archetype is the dominant archetype. Similar to the sensual archetype, they also possess weaker facial expressions. Neither the dominant or the sensual archetype needs to do much with their face, and it's helped if they have more strongly defined facial features. But more similar to the charismatic archetype, the dominant archetype possesses strong body language. They are the walking definition of walk the walk, as their bodies do all of the talking. Some idols with this archetype include, but are not limited to, Changbin of Stray Kids, Karina of aespa, Lido of ONEUS, Asha of Everglow, and Win of MCND. And just like how the charismatic and the sensual archetypes are opposites, the dominant archetype also needs to have an opposite as well, as for every force, there's an equal and an opposite force. I've coined this as being considered the endearing archetype. These are the idols with strong facial expressions and weak body languages. Idols with these archetypes include... Okay, so I don't actually know of any idols like this because it's extremely rare for someone to have strong energy in their facial expressions without that energy in their body language matching it, so... I don't know if any idols actually have this archetype. I'll let you guys know if that ever changes. But similar to how some idols can be both masculine and feminine, some can be both overt and covert, there are actually idols who possess multiple of this final classification of archetypes, and Red Velvet is actually the best group to look at this for. Within Red Velvet, we have Seulgi, who is both a dominant and a charismatic performer, Irene, who's a dominant and essential performer, Wendy, who's a charismatic and essential performer, but leans more to her charismatic side. Joy is a charismatic sensual performer as well, but she leans more towards her sensual side. And then we have Yeri, who is one of the rarest idols in that she is a dominant, charismatic, and sensual performer. And the only other person in K-pop who has this archetype, that Cheryl knows of at least, is former Girls Planet 999 contestant Cha Yubing. Some idols, including Seulgi as well as Lisa of Blackpink, Yeonjun of Stray Kids, and Yeonjun of TXT, look as if they could possibly develop all three archetypes as well. It really depends on what concepts they're given. Okay, and final thing before I start ranking. When I was in one of Cheryl's most recent live streams, which, by the way, if you don't show up to those already, 10 out of 10 would recommend. We have a bunch of fun. I'm a nuisance. I make everyone laugh somewhat. Okay, it's really just arts, but point is, y'all should really show up if you have the opportunity. But Cheryl asked in one of these live streams how I personally approach analyzing stage presence. I don't know if she actually saw my response or not because of how fast the chat was going, but I actually work backwards. I find it easier to analyze an idol if I determine whether or not they're dominant, charismatic, and or sensual before looking to see if they're overt or covert, and then I determine whether their aura type is masculine and or feminine. The reason why I do this is because determining the aura type prematurely, at least in my case, can throw off everything else when analyzing them. There are a couple of idols on this list who are feminine performers, but actually do really well with shorter hair because, like I mentioned, things like facial structure and body shape have to be considered as well. If I determined their aura to be as masculine based on their hairstyle, then I probably would have made mistakes in determining the rest of their performance style. Okay, and finally, before we begin, remember that everything in this video is just an opinion. Nothing I say is 100% fact, and if you think that I ranked an idol either too high or too low on this list, or even if you think that I was totally off in how I described their stage presence, you are more than welcome to comment your own thoughts below, and I look forward to reading them. So, as is custom, we are going to start off with group rankings before we go about the soloists. The group that I put in fourth place is going to be Majors. This group is giving the same energy as TXT and EXO. Byeon is by far the best performer. She can easily suit any concept and her confidence on stage is unmatched. Ida tries to keep up with her but doesn't have the same pull. And Vita tries bridging the gap between herself and the other members, but it's just too far of a jump. Aki, Shinye, and Suzy come off as being very unconfident, and it shows a lot because the type of the music that this group puts out is very dance-oriented. Because of this, there are a lot of dance breaks, and it's very hard to hide when they're not up to par with the rest of the members in terms of owning the stage. If I were to try and make a picture of how I'd rank the group in a vacuum, you'd have Byeon, a gap, Ida, a gap, Vita, a gap, and that last gap would be massive, and then you have the remaining three members pretty close to each other. They need to become more confident in their performing abilities or they'll continue to stand out in a bad way. And these Blackpink type hiatuses their company is putting them through right now aren't helping. I thought for sure that this group was going to be last because of their constant lineup and concept changes. A lot of groups in the fourth generation, such as ITZY, Idol, and Billy, have been doing this where they try changing the concepts with practically every comeback. This is a big part of why IVE became so popular. The group was given one concept that they would all excel with, and they've been sticking to it. Very much similar to how Twice does really well with the cuter concepts. Even their more young adult-ish themed concepts, all of the members suit. But unfortunately, not everyone is capable of being the next Red Velvet. And I think it's safe to say that only Billy and GWSN have really transitioned between opposing concepts seamlessly. Idol can kind of do it, but it seems like the concepts where Uki is more strong suited towards, Shua really struggles with, Minnie can be off and on. It's just not always the most harmonious group stage presence chemistry. But I think with the improvement that Shua has been showing, the group's improving a lot. And I mentioned Twice in discussing nature, but let's talk about them a little more. Twice has a lot of strong performers in the group that tend to stand out. But unlike Twice, Nature's stronger performers struggle as they're all covert performers. That doesn't mean they're bad, but when the only overt performers are some of the weaker ones in the group, we have a problem. The weaker ones start to compete with the stronger ones to stand out, and it ruins the chemistry. With Twice, there's a clear divide between the stronger members being Gio, Nayeon, Momo, and Sana. They're all overt performers, whereas the weaker ones are Chaeyoung, Jungyeon, Daeon, Chui, and Mina. They're all covert, so they're able to blend into the background more, and the group doesn't run the risk of the weaker performers drawing in all the attention to themselves. And what only adds insult to injury is that there haven't been any concepts yet that Nature as a group has tackled that allows all the members to shine. My main issue with this group's chemistry is that Unjo isn't able to suit darker concepts as well, whereas Yui isn't as great with the cuter concepts. But since both are covert performers, they don't stand out much anyways, and therefore they don't disrupt the group's chemistry. This group reminds me of Red Velvet, with Sumin being more similar to Wendy, Miso is more similar to Sogi, and Laura is more reminiscent of Irene. Whereas the other members are more similar to Yeri and Joy in that they're able to balance out the group. I just don't know what this group is going to do moving forward because their last release was in 2021. All I can say is that I hope that the group doesn't go back to cute concepts now that we've seen them and what they're capable of. Similar to Nature, they have a constantly changing lineup that makes things difficult. But unlike Nature and Majors, all the members can easily adapt to new concepts and it doesn't ruin their chemistry as a group. Similar to Dreamcatcher, Sia gets the main character focus that Yuyeon gets, whereas Yechan is more akin to Xion. And like Dreamcatcher, the other members can step up and work as the center when needed. But speaking of concepts, I'm glad that the group seems to be settling into the direction of the darker concepts, as certain members don't really stand out as much with the cuter ones. But again, they have Sia and Yechan who are amazing vocalists. Because of this, they tend to have the most lines, and when those with the most lines are the best performers in the group, it's easier to get away with having weaker ones as they won't have as much center and screen time anyways. Very similar to how in Twice, Gio is the main vocalist, and Nayeon, even though she's a lead vocalist, is treated more so like a main vocalist. And since they're the best performers in the group subjectively, and they have the most lines, they draw in most of the attention. Arang is more similar to Momo in that the role she plays is that of being an incredible dancer who doesn't have many lines, but whenever there's a dance break, she owns it. The only problem that this group ever faced, in my opinion, was really with Daewon's mask. During eras like Irawa and Lemon Candy, it came off as a little more comical than anything. But during Poison, they traded in the discount Easter Bunny costume for a much sleeker mask, and things have just been uphill from there. Okay, I'm going to now rank individual performance abilities. Just a reminder, if a group did well in the group rankings, that doesn't mean that the individuals are necessarily the highest ranking idols on this part of the list. Some groups have amazing performers, but terrible group chemistry, and others are great in group chemistry, but the performers are overall much weaker. And then again, last time I'm going to remind you all this, these are my own personal opinions. If you disagree, feel free to comment below with your thoughts, and also make your own ranking listing, because I would love to see them. But with that out of the way, let's get into the individual rankings. Daewon is literally impossible to determine archetype for because she's constantly wearing a mask. She's been vocal about how it helps her feel calmer on stage, and I can respect that. However, it doesn't change my decision in ranking her last, as I really can't figure out what type of a performer she is. But given how My Idol Entertainment has managed to make the mask work well in the group's concept, and how they're really making it work better with the aesthetics, I can't complain as much. I don't know what it is about Sunshine, but everything she does feels forced, and as if she doesn't enjoy being on stage. Maybe she's nervous, maybe she's naturally an awkward person, and that's totally okay, because not everyone is going to have the confidence of CL or Yona when performing, but whenever she's using her facial expressions, it feels like she's only half doing so. And that really bothers me, as she could easily be a much stronger performer and actually strengthen the group as a whole. But until she looks more natural while performing, she's really hindering her own and the group's performances. I also want to point out how she performs much better with shorter and flatter hair, especially in darker colors. It really brings attention to her cheekbones and makes her look more expressive. When she has these bright colored styles that move out a lot more horizontally, it's too much for her to compete with because of how they weaken her facial expressions. Uche is generally very boring to watch on stage. She's one of the group's visuals, and even that isn't enough to help garner attention. I don't know what it was, maybe it's just the cobalt streaks in her hair, but she seemed to have improved a bit during Limbo era. And that's definitely going to be a common theme amongst a lot of the members in this group. But even so, it wasn't a massive amount of noticeable improvement. Being a central performer is a double-edged sword. On one hand, she doesn't have to do much to stand out. On the other hand, if she does absolutely nothing, it's like she isn't even there. I hope she continues to show improvement in their next era because it's really needed. Susie's biggest issue is that her facial structure is very reminiscent to that of Shua, and that there aren't any strong or defining features to make it stand out. Shua can get away with this because she's a dominant performer who's also a dancer, meaning that her body can do most of the work, but Susie doesn't have that luxury, as she's more inclined to being a charismatic performer. This means that she needs to use her face more to stand out, but with how timid she comes off of as most of the time, she struggles to do so with her face. This is further compounded by how she's stronger when delivering her lines, meaning that she almost totally shuts off once the attention is on another member. She seems to do better in concepts like Dancing in the Starlit Night, and she may have a sensual side, similar to how I think Winter of Espa might also as well. But until that's developed, she really struggles in powerful concepts like with Salute. Shinye has impressed me in that she shows a lot of potential. The group had a lot of comebacks within their first year. Initially, she was really boring to watch, and I would have put her below Susie. But starting with Dancing in the Starlit Night era, she's slowly becoming more expressive with her face, which is important for a charismatic performer. Before this era, she would pretty much just stare blankly at the camera, and it felt like watching a robot. But she seemed to steadily become more comfortable performing and is starting to express herself. I hope that this year off from promotions doesn't reset her to how she was before they debuted. We've seen with idols such as Yeri, Giselle, and even Shua as of recent that it's always possible for idols to grow as performers and develop more archetypes along the way. I hope she continues to blossom. Aki both amazes and concerns me. Most of the time she comes off as really awkward and unsure of herself. What's good for her though is the fact that she's a partially sensual performer. This means that she doesn't have to do much with both her facial expressions and her body language to make an impact. And there are times in which she just lets loose and looks free from any sort of stress that may be afflicting her. If she becomes more comfortable on stage and doesn't have to worry as much, she can easily rise much higher on this list. If this girl's stylist is watching the video for any reason, please, please, please give her more colorful hair in all of their future eras. Just like with Winter, feminine, covert, charismatic performers have a hard time bringing out their charismatic energy if not performing in either a cuter or a ballad-like concept. Chabin usually doesn't struggle with this as the majority of Nature's concepts have been either cute or quirky. But during their darker eras, she's basically invisible and struggles to stand out. During Limbo era, though, they gave her this gorgeous shade of electric violet infused cerulean. It reminded me of Jungkook's hair from Butter era, and I absolutely love it. Otherwise, I didn't notice that much of a difference in her performing abilities. Chabin definitely is a weaker performer, and I think that like Winter, Yiren, and Chewy, she's mainly popular because she's a visual, but if her hair and wardrobe stylists are able to give her more impactful looks, I think they'll make up for her subtlety. Lou is a sensual performer with strong facial features, and that works beautifully for her. She may not do much, but she's able to match any of Nature's concepts. There's a huge problem though. Bangs absolutely ruin her stage presence. I swear, if I ever move to South Korea, I am running for president just so that I can outlaw K-pop idols from wearing bangs. Y'all know how I feel about Winter and the bangs, like very adversarial relationship here. But yeah, in regards to Lou, with the bangs covering up half of her face, it makes it painfully obvious how little she's doing when performing. When the bangs are gone, her subtle facial expressions are much clearer and they really make a bigger impact. But again, the bangs have to go. Eunjo deserves a lot of credit. She has the same archetype as Winter, who I keep referencing in this video. Like I mentioned in my How Hairstyling Affects Stage Presence for the aespa edition video, Winter's hair is better when it's longer and lighter, as she is more better suited for cuter concepts. During their first eras, Eunjo was doing just fine, but somehow managed to fit into Ghost era without disrupting the group. Yes, I don't think she's that strong of a performer as her archetype is really only suited for one type of concept, but being able to perform without getting in the way of the stronger members when it comes to stage presence is still a great quality in my opinion, and having it allows DreamNote to have a structure more similar to Twice. In my opinion, Haru's growth has been the most impressive over the years. They debuted when she was 18, and you can see her performance style maturing and evolving as she did. It's actually fitting that her hair in the Limbo era is a bright tint of wine red. That's how she's aged, like wine. A lot of people get mad at idols for changing as they get older, but it's to be expected. She's going to be 23 soon. One's late teens through mid and even to late 20s are when they discover the most about themselves and show a lot of change in who they are, and we've seen this with Haru. I wouldn't be surprised if she developed another archetype, but also she really needs to. As another feminine, covert, charismatic idol in this group, she struggles in their darker concepts. Her steady growth, though, could lead to a breakthrough in her performing abilities. Miku is that member that doesn't do much but always leaves a lasting impression on you. Unfortunately, that's not enough to rank her higher on this list. Her facial expressions can be weak for a charismatic performer when she's not the center of the choreography. When she is the focus, she delivers. But when she isn't, she almost turns off in a sense. I think her main priority should be practicing to maintain her energy consistently throughout the performance, and she'll be much better off. Vita is one of those idols who I wouldn't describe as having bad stage presence, but at the same time, she doesn't stand out as much in the group. I would say that she's above average. Her archetype makes her a malleable performer, and that works really well given Major's music doesn't really fit specifically into either cute or girl crush concepts. Someone like Vita would really fit well into a group that handles multiple concepts like Red Velvet, as her diversity would be more apparent. But regardless, she does a great job and deserves the recognition. Bonnie doesn't really stand out as much in the group. She's far from being a weak performer, but for someone with her archetype, she really doesn't show it off to its full potential. I think she has a lot of growing to do as a performer. The good thing though is that she has the potential to do so. What really hinders where I put her on the list is she has the same archetype as her groupmate Miso. Miso, though, shows much more rapid growth between eras, and in a sense, she leaves Bonnie behind. If Bonnie continues to grow as a performer and doesn't plateau at any point, I think she has a strong chance of rising up much higher on this list. I don't know what happened, but Loa snapped during Limbo era. I'm not really sure if it's so much that she improved, if she fits the concept better, or if her hair just worked much more better with her performance ability. This is very reminiscent of Onda of Everglow and how she didn't really improve necessarily that much as a performer. All she needed was for one of the stylists at Yua Entertainment to bring in a pair of scissors because shorter hair really strengthens her presence as she is a masculine performer. I'm talking about Loha, by the way. Onda is a masculine feminine performer that does really well with longer hair, by the way. I really hope that the group is able to do more songs with that sort of intense and experimental vibe, similar to something that I would have expected from FX. That way, Loa can really shine and develop more as a performer. Momaka is like a paradox. She shouldn't work in this group. Her cute demeanor and appearance make her look very much like a Disney princess, and many fans of the group will attest to that. But somehow she does an amazing job and doesn't feel out of place. Her archetype is perfect for their creepier concepts. Her only issue is that her groupmates stand out much easier because their charisma and or dominance draw the attention of the audience during the more intense parts of their songs. But she doesn't feel out of place, nor does she harm the group's chemistry. She's doing amazing. Maybe it's because they share the same archetype, but both Sulgi and Miso are at their best with shorter hair. However, longer hair doesn't inhibit their stage presence. Psycho-era Sulgi will always be superior though. Opposite to Sulgi, her charismatic side developed first throughout their cuter concepts. It wasn't until the Ghost era that her dominant side came out, and it's great that it did because a group doing such cutesy concepts would absolutely tank in darker concepts if the members weren't able to rise to the occasion. She really brought things up a notch. Arang is my ultimate bias in this group and one of my favorite idols in general. I love when she performs in a dance break. She makes it her own. It's very reminiscent of Momo of Twice or both Lino and Felix of Stray Kids. She is the only idol I've come across where makeup is able to compensate for where she struggles in stage presence. She reminds me a lot of Solgi from Red Velvet's earlier eras. Unlike Cheryl, I actually think that Solgi's charismatic side was present before Red Flavor era. You can see it during Happiness, but between then and Red Flavor, it seemed to disappear and become an afterthought. I swear, I'm talking more about Sulgi than any of the idols that this video is supposed to be about. Go stream 28 Reasons when you're done watching this. Arang's charismatic side comes out during happier concepts like Playing House and Lemon Candy. Otherwise, she's completely defaulting to her dominant side. Fortunately, though, Pink Fantasy's makeup is always so striking and bold during these concepts that she doesn't have to do much with her face to make an impression. This is something that idols such as Winter and Chewy can't really rely upon because their groups have yet to tackle any concepts that require such levels of makeup. And I hope that Pink Fantasy is able to do more cheerful B-sides moving forward, just so that Arang can really develop her charismatic side. I could not, for the life of me, narrow down Ida's archetype, and it was such a struggle. At first, I was contemplating labeling her as a masculine feminine performer, but after watching and rewatching and rewatching the clips of her performing, I realized that she wasn't a feminine performer. She's a sensual performer. And it's sometimes hard to distinguish when an idol is either a feminine dominant performer versus a masculine one. Also between if they are a masculine sensual performer versus a feminine one, because the intensity that dominant performers is very similar to that masculine performers naturally have, whereas with sensual performers, because they're a little more subtle and fluid, it's more similar to how feminine performers perform. But in Ida's case, I believe that she is a masculine performer through and through and can bring out dominant, sensual, and charismatic elements in her stage presence. So she is both a rare and impressive performer for being able to possess all three archetypes while still being a rookie. And now I wait for Cheryl to yell at me, asking if I'm crazy for even insinuating this. Feminine covert dominant performers are like a hidden ace in most girl groups. With how many girl groups try sticking to cuter concepts, these performers often go unnoticed as their archetype becomes pretty much invisible. But whenever the group decides to change things up, these members become unstoppable. If you watched Yui in most of DreamNote's performances, she is really lackluster. But the Ghost era changed everything for her. That calm confidence that she exhibits remind me of Dami of Dreamcatcher. Without doing much, she's able to pull you in with her presence alone. And once you're in, you're trapped. You can't look away from her. If DreamNote continues to make songs with these darker and more intense themes, she's going to be a threat to the other female idols considered the standard for dominant performers. If you told me that someone so cutesy and jovial would easily transition into an intense concept, I would have probably laughed. But Sumin did just that. A lot of charismatic performers struggle when switching to darker concepts if they don't possess either a dominant or sensual archetype as well. When using your eyes in these types of concepts, you can't just have them bright and fully opened. They need to be controlled in order to match the intensity and the confidence needed in these songs. And when it comes to your mouth, you can't just plaster a smile and call it a day. I mean, if the concept you're portraying is an abandoned psychiatric hospital, then sure, go for it, but otherwise, smirks and grimaces go over so much better. There are so few purely charismatic performers that can handle this. And since masculine performers tend to have the aura of confidence anyway, such as Mia, it's mainly the feminine charismatic performers that really find a hard time transitioning to these darker concepts. Sumin is very comparable to Suki of Billy in my opinion, in the sense that they managed to overcome a hurdle that nobody would have expected them to. And since she seems to receive the main character spotlight similar to Nayeon, Irene, and Gyuhyun, it's great seeing that she's able to maintain the audience's attention and perform well. Aurora is another idol on this list that reminds me of Onda a lot. No, I don't think that she's nearly as good of a performer as Onda, but she gets minimal lines and screen time. Because of this, it's very easy to overlook her. Similar to idols like Joy, Jiyu, Jiwoo, etc., something about idols that have a J at the beginning of their name and being sensual performers. But anyways, like these idols, Aurora's presence is absolutely ruined with lighter hair colors, especially shades of blonde. Darker hair and stronger eyeliner really help her make a statement, and since she's a sensual performer, she naturally fits the definition of less is more. So letting her hair and makeup do a lot of the talking really helps. But overall, she's definitely part of the stronger half of nature and deserves recognition. Hisun isn't the most standout performer in all of K-pop, but what she is consistent. Every time I see her, she maintains the same level of energy from the start to the end of the performance, and it's great to watch. She can switch up concepts easily too, and goes from a delicate princess to a punk rock badass. Out of all the members in Pink Fantasy, I was most afraid of Harin going into Poison era. She's the only member to not possess either a dominant or sensual archetype in her stage presence. And as a charismatic performer, she's always portrayed herself in more of a youthful and even girly-like way, for lack of a better description. And again, think of Suki of Billy during Ginga Minga Yo era, as they possess the same archetype and are more juvenile in how they perform compared to the more adult, grown woman-like aura that the majority of female idols tend to encompass. But with Harin, she rose to the occasion and is very well deserving of being this high up on the list. Sohee had big shoes to fill when she became a member of Nature. She joined the group as Gaga was leaving. Gaga was definitely one of the stronger members when it came to performing, and the group would have lost a lot of charisma with her departure if Sohee hadn't joined. Being both a main vocalist and a center means that she gets a lot of screen time and has a lot of pressure to carry the group, but she does it and does an amazing job with it. She reminds me of Sinbi of G-Friend in that they both have well-defined facial features and seem to know that they don't have to do much while performing. Their confidence speaks for itself. I don't know how she did it, but Sebum has carried Nature's stage presence on her back since their debut. Most of the group can be really bland and uninteresting to watch, but Sebum never disappoints. I wish that she would be a little more expressive from time to time, but what balances that out is how she seems to be so confident in what she's doing. Girls in Limbo era were especially great for her, as her sensual side really got to thrive and she became unstoppable. This woman's confidence is dangerous. Similar to a lot of other members, it didn't really show prominently until Ghost era. Whoever at their company decided to pull a 180 like that deserves a raise. She was doing just fine, but when she was able to finally exude that level of self-assurance, she became unstoppable. One thing though, keep the bleach away from her hair. I don't want her ever returning to blonde again. Laura's presence is hindered by brighter colored hair, and it doesn't let her eyes show as well, which is a huge focal point in that sort of dominating intimidation that she has with how confident she is. Speaking of which, Beyonce's confidence is insane. She reminds me a lot of Karina, and is probably how they have the same archetype. Both of them are masters of walking the walk. Once Beyonce starts performing, she doesn't stop until the song is done. Her aura is maintained throughout. Once you start watching her, you can't stop. It's terrifying how addictive her confidence is. And given the type of music that Majors releases, she has no shortage in dance breaks to show off what she's capable of. Y'all need to be grateful that she isn't in a more popular group, or she would really be a threat to some of your faves. I would like to issue out a thank you statement to whoever the stylist at My Doll Entertainment was that walked into the set of the Poison music video filming with a pair of scissors and decided to go to town with Yichen's hair. Female masculine performers tend to have better stage presence with shorter hair. Again, some of the best examples would be Lisa of Blackpink and Ryujin of ITZY. But similar to Medic Jin of Girl Kind, thank you to like the three people watching who know who I'm talking about, Yechen and her stage presence just becomes so much more heightened when it's cut even shorter than the conventional bob cut that we normally see. Her charisma is off the charts, and she was truly born to be doing this. And there we have it, the queen of this list. When it comes to the best charismatic performers amongst the fourth generation girl groups, Sia is able to stand in the ring with idols such as Mia of Everglow and the soloist Alexa, but what really amazes me is the control she exudes. Similar to Xion of Dreamcatcher, who has the same archetype, Sia is able to slow down, which helps for the rare times in which they do cuter concepts such as with Lemon Candy. Sia softens her facial expressions and doesn't feel the need to be over the top, as some overt performers can be in more laid back concepts if they aren't aware as to how much energy they're putting out. Also, I just want to say that she is one of the best idols who actually is an all-rounder. She's a strong dancer, she's the main rapper of the group for a reason, and in a similar respect to how Sulgi is only the lead vocalist of Red Velvet because Wendy, who's the main vocalist, is just extraordinary, Sia's vocals would easily make her the main vocalist in most girl groups if it wasn't for the fact that Yechen is just one of the best in all fourth gen girl groups out there when it comes to vocals. Sia is a force to be reckoned with, and My Doll Entertainment should be so fortunate and grateful that they have such an amazing person under their label. And yeah, that is everything. Again, let me know what you guys thought about the rankings. Who would you put higher? Who would you put lower? Did you actually know about any of these groups before watching this video? Hopefully you guys learn about a new group or two because that is what I'm setting out to do here. But yeah, let me know what you think and what other kinds of videos you want to see in the future. I want to say when I think that my next video will be out, but given how long it took to put this one out, and I said it was going to be Friday or Saturday, I'm not going to do that. So I'll see you guys when I see you. Until next time, stay healthy, happy, and hydrated. Peace out.